Please help me in welcoming back to the stage at the Billy Wilder Theater, the director of tonight's film, Arthur Dong. Wow, thank you so much for this film. It's really a pleasure to watch it on a big screen and to see it with an audience. And it's your first time, like you said, seeing the restoration blown up big. So, what are your impressions on seeing it again?
It's just absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Indie Collect, UCLA Film and TV Archive. Um, it's and also Joe Milner, who did the whole entire re-recording mix of the tracks, and going from film elements to digital was, I didn't expect for the audio to be a problem, but there was, I'm not sure how it didn't work, but Joe made it work, and so it sounded great, and everything is just quite wonderful. So yeah, I'm just quite pleased.
I'm so glad we get to share that with you. I want to take it back. Obviously, the film takes us back to a moment during which hearings are happening around gays and lesbians openly serving in the military in 1993-94. I want to take it back a little bit before then, just to ask you a little bit about how you got started and your production company, Deep Focus, you founded in 1981 or 82. Tell us about Deep Focus and what you set out to do. I know, just
Okay.
in the very beginning.
Yeah, I was unceremoniously fired from my dream job at KGO TV and ABC in San Francisco. I was sent out on the shoot. I was a producer. I was sent out on the shoot by the executive producer to get certain kinds of shots for a story. That was my job for that assignment, and I did that with the crew. And the next day, the manager of the station called me in and says, "You're fired because we're in union house. You can't tell the crew what to do." I said, "Yeah, but I was told by my executive producer to get the shots." And I said, "F you, corporate world," and started my own company, Deep Focus Productions.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's why, that's really what happened.
So there was a discharge in your own past that brought you to working on the
Independently,
stories.
yeah, because I
independently on the
said,
stories you wanted to make.
I don't need this. Yeah.
Could you? And I'm glad you
Yeah.
mentioned that it was KGO. Yeah,
I mean, yeah, it was my dream job.
Right.
I was still in film school at San Francisco State University, and I said, "Whoa," and back then in the early '80s, independent film jobs were just not to be had. I mean, they weren't even in a lexicon. It was not in the vocabulary. So for me to get a corporate job in one of the major stations, news stations, doing documentary work was just incredible.
I want to call out I mean, as a native Bay Arean, I was appreciative of that, and I wanted to know a bit more about the filmmaking and video making ecosystem at the time in the San Francisco Bay Area, because a lot of the filmmakers in the Pioneers of Queer Cinema series have roots in the Bay Area, also active in Los Angeles as well as elsewhere. But could you tell us when you were starting out in that scene or after you had left, what was it like trying to get a project like this or like Forbidden City USA off the ground?
Well, this one in particular, this is Coming Under Fire was my second feature documentary, and the climate. We started. I first learned about the project from an editorial or review. I think a book review of Alan's book in the LA Times. And what struck me immediately was the correlation that the discrimination of the LGBT community at that time, World War II, was experienced under the government, under public policy, under governance, and I've always been interested in governance and public policy and how it affects groups of people. And I said, whoa, they were doing not exactly this, but they were regulating Japanese Americans during World War II. And I didn't know they were doing that to my community as well, the gay community. And it immediately struck me as a civil rights issue. And that the government was very busy really discriminating against classes of people in World War II, and that's what attracted me to the story, and the struggle that Alan had, and I found later as a filmmaker trying to raise money, particularly within the gay community, was that no one wanted to support this because it was like, oh, why are we supporting someone's right to go to third world countries and kill babies, to be in the military. The same thing happened with when there was the marriage equality issue that came up. In the beginning was why we want to be institutionalized like heterosexual, into marriage. There's that argument. For me, though, it was always about civil rights. I was brought up in the 60s, San Francisco, Haight-Ashbury, Flower Children, that whole countercultural environment. So I had certain feelings about the military as well. Sure, I protested the Second War in the 60s, and that carried on with me today. But I said, no, this is not about joining the military. It's about equality. It's about access as citizens. And it's about governments and how can our government do that to us? It was more about that. But the gay community at that time, we tried to go after gay money. I said, well, this is, why won't you support this documentary? That's because, well, we don't believe in the cause. Same with marriage equality when that happened. And it wasn't until the National Endowment of the Arts at that time, I have to bring you back to the early 90s or even late 80s, when there was the gang, I think they called them the Gang of Four, Tim Miller from the Highways and three other, Karen, I forget her name, there were three other artists that were just...
Karen Finley.
Yeah, Karen Finley and two other artists. Thank you. They had got small funding from the NEA, and there was this uproar over how the NEA was supporting pornography and all of this. And I think I had applied to the NEA a couple times for this film, and this is what I've learned as a fundraiser. If you get rejected, and I get rejected a lot for fundraising, is that maybe I didn't do my homework to craft this proposal in a way that they can see it. And what I learned was that I needed to not talk about this as gay and lesbian history, but as American history. And I framed it in that, with that point of view. And at that time at the NEA, the new director, I think she was fairly new, was Anne Radice. Did I get that? Who's going to correct me? But correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. Anne Radice, I think was her name. And I'm not sure she was openly gay, but she was a lesbian. And we knew that. I'm not sure why we knew that. And we were we didn't think it would come through, but it did go through. And there was no controversy. It was very interesting. And then I forget the chronology, and then we got most of the money from ITVS, which is a CPB, a public TV source of money, but nothing from the gay community. So that was kind of disheartening, but that was the environment.
So it sounds like, on the one hand, it was fortuitous that there was someone who was sympathetic to the project, but and on the other hand, it was in a way kind of the themes of the film kind of like a closeting or kind of covert way.
It was a safe project for the NEA to fund, right. But at the same time, say, hey, we're funding gay projects too, but it wasn't like it was a gay project. It was a historical project.
Right. Tell us a bit about your collaboration with Alan Berube. So his book length study, Coming Out Under Fire, came out in 1990. You'd read the review. What was it like getting to know him, getting in touch with him, and then collaborating with him on the film?
Well, I think this is kind of like the Chinese part of me, is that you don't go directly to somebody. You kind of try to get an introduction. So I had known Bob Epstein because we're both from San Francisco and we're both filmmakers. So I said, do you know this guy, Alan Berube? and he goes, yeah. And I said, can you introduce me to him? And he did. And Alan wrote back and said, oh, I know Arthur Dong. I've been using his film Forbidden City, USA, about Chinatown nightclubs in the 40s in my course on gay community at UC Santa Cruz. And he was using that film to talk about gay communities, even though they're not overtly gay. So he had already known about my work. So there was an immediate respect for each other's work, and that helped a lot. And so the relationship started from there. And he goes, "Yeah, let's do this together." And he was a very active partner. I mean, he moved down. He was in San Francisco. He moved down to LA, where I still live, and said, "I want to make this my job for a while and see how a film adaptation works." And we worked really intensely on the adaptation. His book is like that thick. It's very dense. But for me, what struck me were the oral histories, were the stories of the veterans and their personal stories. And I said, for me as a filmmaker, the way I would adapt it is to look really at these personal stories and really frame them within the larger history. And he agreed. And but then with him, I was able to. He was able to point out the major historical points and constitutional points to put in the film and make sure those were infused in the story. And it was a wonderful collaboration. And he wanted to be part of the production, which is great. We were having so much fun together because Alan was a very sweet guy, and he's just really easy to work with and wonderful to work with. And so he became our location manager, and he coordinated all the travel and made sure we all got fed, and he was like our production manager. It was really great.
I was wondering about the location scouting credit that he has.
No, he did all that because the writing part of it was kind of done. It got done, and because of him, we were able to find all the veterans. He had interviewed a lot more veterans that are in the film and that are in the book. And I think a few of the veterans in the film, I don't have in my head right now, were not in the book, but he had interviewed them personally anyway. So we looked through all of the profiles that he had of the people he had met. And, we cast the film. I mean, quote unquote, we cast the film to have different kinds of experiences. The only, there were a couple African American lesbians that we had contact with, but they in the end didn't want to be a part of the film because of the concerns of exposure. And we're again talking about the 1990s for an older generation of people like. Stuart Loomis said on screen, even now on screen, I feel kind of apprehensive talking about this, but that was his generation. And even Bruce Lee, the African-American veteran we have on camera, he came at the last minute. We really worked hard, and I'm not sure how we finally got him to say yes, but he said yes at the very last minute.
It's remarkable. It kind of comes across in the film, the different kind of terminology or language or comfort with fully coming out, even though they may have lived out or semi-out lives in this subsequent, 3, 4, 5 decades. Just the not quite ability or the discomfort with naming, who or what you were, which is something to respect. I mean, that's something that they lived, but something that was remarkable about that.
And that's something I had to. This is actually. The film right before this about the Chinatown nightclubs was about the 40s. And what I had learned was, especially with this film, was I had to really honor the history. One of the earliest cuts of this film interspersed those 1993 hearings, those Senate hearings throughout the film. And it was commenting on history and present day and back and forth. It was, I probably have a VHS tape of that version somewhere. But in the end, it was like, no, the history stands for itself. It tells its own story, and who am I to reframe and revision that history? And so we took all of that out. And it's funny because we submitted a version to Sundance with that intercutting, and they loved it and accepted the film. And they accept films months before the festival, and we said, we changed the whole film. And and we don't have those hearings throughout the film now. And they were like really concerned. And I said, we had to say, well, you just have to trust us. It's gonna work. And I think we did the right thing.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a way in which that works where it doesn't make it so presentist,
Yeah.
and it's you've of course there's a tremendous amount of archival research that both Alan did in preparing the book, the archival footage research,
It's
and
Helen Weiss. I don't know if Helen Weiss is still working, but if you ever find Helen Weiss and you need help at the National Archives, she's the one. She just dug up stuff, and this is where, money really helps. It's great to be an independent filmmaker, but without the money from the NEA and particularly ITVS, I think our funding was over 200,000. And, we're talking about how many years ago is this? 30, 40 years ago? 30 years ago. And that's a lot of money 30 years ago. But that helped pay for that intense research of stationing her at the National Archives. And this is before things got digital. Just being there, digging through whatever keyword searches we could give to her to find that some just really wonderful footage.
and so were things that's kind of tricky to think about. Were things then telecine there, or create they would create access copies and then she would courier them or ship them back to you in LA, or were you visiting her while she was doing the research in Washington?
Well, first, y'all know what telecine is. Okay,
Here's where we get to the film archival part, right?
I mean, I have to say it because I was mentioning Marlo Thomas, and a couple of people here didn't know who Marlo Thomas was or Danny Thomas. I said, oh, okay. Anyway, yeah, it was very complicated and very expensive because a lot of the material that we wanted to see, not use, we didn't know we wanted to use them yet until we could see them, right? It's all these index cards, paper index cards, or microfiche, and we had to order up work prints of these negatives, and I think a few of them were nitrate, and that in order even to see it, so that took that was a long process. It took a lot of money, as you can imagine, and finally we then decided on what to actually make good prints out of.
And yet none of it feels like padding, or I mean, for not having footage. I mean, what was really interesting to rewatch was the footage of the drag shows that in a way were celebrated as part of, a troop morale or camaraderie, but for having, I mean, basically no archival footage that you know of out, obviously out people who are serving the military during World War II, everything feels as though it should be there. And I guess maybe you could tell us a bit about some of the different sources that were in National Archives, so that you had like those shows, for example. I'm kind of curious about this kind of celebration of queerness for fun or for R&R. Where did those? Who thought to record those? Were those mostly newsreel?
Oh yeah, this is military footage.
Right.
Some of them were newsreels. In there was this, I think is it the mental health? Right, the mental health newsreel was March of Dimes. March of Times.
Oh, right.
And yeah, and a lot of it was military footage, like the naked men, being examined. Those are all military. That's military footage, official military footage. And luckily, because it was military, it was public domain. It was so the rights didn't cost us anything. We would give Helen, one of the key words we told her to research was sodomy. Mm-hmm. And that's how we found out. There was only one, as far as the research at that time that was conducted for the film, there was only that one piece of film in which sodomy is even mentioned, the word sodomy, although it's throughout the directors, sodomy, this, sodomy, that, but that was the only time we found it on film, and we made sure to use that. So yeah, the research was pretty intense. It was, but a lot of it mostly was government film.
Oh. Yeah, the process of assembling it all together. Once you had your footage, and you talked about other versions. So, kind of, how did you know when you arrived at the version that worked? Was it a question of timing and submissions, or had you had? I had noticed some of the special thanks. What were? I imagine you had shown some early versions. What were some what was some of the feedback that you got about the structuring of making this film?
Well, I first have to mention the editor, Veronica Silver. She's part of the Mariposa film group that produced Word Is Out, so which is part of the series coming up. So she was our editor, and we're editing film now on a Steenbeck. Okay, so for those who don't know what that is, check it out. There's actually a Steenbeck. Thelma Shoemaker's Steenbeck is on display at the Academy Museum. It's a huge machine.
And it's on lifts, right? Too.
Yeah. So anyway, so we cut it on film, and our assistant was Marilyn Moore, and she was a great assistant. But it was going through the process we went through was we actually, I'm trying to remember, I think we gave everything to Veronica. That's the way she liked to work. She was, let me figure it out. So she did the first cut. We came in. It was a lot of back and forth. The putting in the Senate hearings was complicated because that was on video. So we had to, in order to cut at that time, we had to transfer all that video into film elements. And in fact, that's why you can see now that the film clips are kind of blurry. I mean, because they were, what you're seeing here now is video clips, and this is 3/4 inch now, okay? It's not, it's like, okay, it's way below what you're using on your iPhone. And in terms of resolution, 3/4 inch transferred to film, and then now what you're seeing here is that transferred back to video, digital elements. So it's like a lot of generations away. Today, it'll be pristine. But we had to get all of those elements to Veronica and to intercut. And, I think it was just a lot of back and forth, like, what, can we do this? Should we do this? I don't remember how we finally said, take out all that stuff from 1993, but I'm glad we did. Yeah. But Veronica, she just worked endless hours in the editing room because, it was a long process.
In terms of finding these stories and sort of eliciting them out from these World War II veterans, could you tell me, did you run into any instances, maybe Alan did, around declassification? I mean, it's kind of another kind of coming out where there's a quest to find the truth or documentation of what really happened. Did you run into that in terms of research, or probably not anyone's personal stories, but...
There was no conflict. It was just a matter of knowing where to look. Like the newspapers, the Myrtle Beach, or the newspapers.
The Myrtle Beach Bell.
Yeah. Well, Clark didn't have those, but he remembered them very clearly and remembered the names. And we went, it's just research. We went through his papers, got the official case number, went somewhere. It's like it's talking a long time ago. Went to the archives or National Archives, the military records, and found the court papers for his court martial, and they were in his court martial case papers, all those newspapers. So we got copies of his newspapers, and that's how we found those. So that's just one example. We never had to declassify anything. We didn't have to do that, but it's all public record that we went to. Clark, as you know, I'm not sure you noticed, but he didn't have a last name because at that time he was a little apprehensive about revealing his identity totally. And you can see some black marks in some of his court-martial papers. That's by his request. R.D. Winter is in silhouette, and it's because he was nervous about that. And this is a little trivia. R.D. Winter, the reason why it's R.D. Winter, because it's of the character in Rebecca. Because, I mean, he chose that himself. Because I want to be called R.D. Winter. It's because of Rebecca, the movie. Well, the novel. Anyway, yeah.
So you talked a bit about the process of adapting a documentary, feature-length documentary from a book, and you've also subsequently directed documentaries that you've either turned into a book or made in concert. So, continuing with kind of paper research, what have you learned from that? And I guess also the making of this movie. But what is sort of your approach to paper documentary research or physical non-film collections?
I'm not sure I understand. All right, well, I'll try to. I think I
Yeah.
know what you asked, but tell me if I'm not answering your questions. Just stop me. Just say stop.
I love it already.
I love research. I'm curious. I think
can
that's
tell.
why I'm a documentary filmmaker. And if you see all my films, except for my very first film when I was made, is well, not required teenage the research. They all require research, and it's heavy research, and some of it paper, some of it visual imagery. I just love the thrill of finding something that I never knew before that's historical. I love the thrill of seeing images from the past. I've always, in fact, I once wanted to be a film historian when I was a teenager because I just love the fact that you can see a time way before I was born or alive, and be brought back to that by moving images or still pictures even. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question that I didn't understand.
I think you answered a question I didn't even know I was asking. So, I mean, when people ask, how do you get into the film preservation field? It's like, yeah, why am I doing that? And I think that that is interesting because that speaks to me personally. It's like the ability to recreate that time through still images or moving images. Is
Or
something
just
that's-
being brought to that time. It's
Right.
like going into a time machine. And I remember the moment. I can tell you the moment when what happened to Baby Jane was out in 64? 64? 60? Someone
the
must
right
know
audience,
it.
yeah.
64? Okay. So I was 11 years old. Okay. And do the math. And I saw Of Human Bondage, which is Betty Davis in 1930, 30 what? Someone else, early 30s, okay? And, she's skinny and, slender, and she looked like she was a lot younger, 30s. And then I saw Whatever Happened to Baby Jane in 64. I said, whoa, it's like I'm being brought back to when she was her in the 1930s. I was just amazed at that. I mean, I was just 11, but I want to see more of that. And I started studying film and film history and silence and going to altered retro houses in San Francisco, which at that time there were many of, theaters, real big, screens, and watching old movies in silence. And I wanted to be a film historian until everything changed. And then I became a filmmaker.
Well, yeah, it's the perfect transition, and in a way you have maybe more in the way that and it's a tremendously valuable service to a gay person like me and to many other people, and to veterans in the case of this film, and especially queer veterans, is to be able to see people who had gone through something, to record those stories, to assemble them in a meaningful way. You've contributed to the historical record, and now, in an odd sense, you maybe weren't thinking about it at the time, but you've created another kind of time machine back to that time to see what it is that people were going through. So,
Yeah, so it's like a time machine to a time machine.
yeah, now you're starting
Yeah.
it's starting to collapse in.
Yeah, I never thought of that. That's cool. I like that. Yeah,
I think so too.
Yeah.
We're so fortunate to have you here. I'm wondering if there are any audience. Would you feel like answering some audience questions about the making of the film? Do we have any questions from the audience? There'll be microphones coming down from our citizens at the theater, so just be sure to wait for them. We'll start over here in the middle for the first.
Although my voice can carry without a microphone, but I'll certainly use this.
Thank you.
Hi there, a wonderful film. And I was wondering, from the time that you met Alan to the time that, let's say it was finished, even with the clips from '93 throughout it, what was that period of time?
I'm going to say 3 years. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was because, as I mentioned, he knew me from my film Forbidden City, USA, which was released in '89, end of '89. And his book, I've don't have the exact publishing date, but my guess is it was published in 1990 because I was probably the way I find ideas for films is I do a lot of reading of periodicals and whatever I could get my hands on, and that's where I read the review. And the fundraising took probably about 2 years. Let me think. Yeah, because we started filming in '93 when right before the hearings exploded, nationally, and so that was '93. So it took us about 2 years to fundraise. We worked all through '93 once we got the money, and it premiered at Sundance '94, January '94.
We had a question over here.
Is it on?
There you go.
Excellent. I remember seeing it at Outfest. I'm assuming it was probably at the Pantages in '95. I think it went from Sundance to Outfest that summer. I think Outfest was only we started here in '83 at UCLA. Very, very moving tonight. I do have a question about the loss of images. When you're working with JPEG files, you lose every time an image is used. It gets less and less. So I'm very curious on the restoration process. What process did you play in the part of the restoration? I just don't know how that process works with UCLA.
Oh, well,
For example, did you have to go through it frame by frame? Is there software that does it? I just don't understand that.
well, we have experts in the audience. I can summarize because it's a very complicated process. They took the negatives, original, not the uncut negatives, but I think they took an IP, right? Yeah, which is, an IP is an interpositive negative, which is made from the cut negatives to make prints out of. So it's kind of a generation away from the original negatives, and they scan each frame, right? If you can imagine this, 24 frames per second, they scanned each frame in 4K. So that took forever, probably. And I'm getting a nod from Todd, head of preservation, because I'm kind of guessing this. And then Indie Collect took those scans and timed and colored and all those wonderful things you do in Photoshop. They did it to each frame, and then I came in and stirred up a lot of trouble because I'm just so picky, and then COVID came and stopped everything, and so it's a long process. But I think what you saw here was from those what Indie Collect produced from those original scans. So yeah. Well, yeah, I think so. Well, actually, coincidentally, last Friday I got an email from a distributor. So we don't know where it's going. It's just like, do you have the rights? I said, yes, I do. They said, well, let's talk. So we don't know what's going to happen, though. Those things always go one way or the other. But there is interest, so that's great.
I see in the back there, second to last row.
Hi, Arthur.
It's David Seiger.
Hi.
My neighbor. And Mary Ann.
Yeah.
My neighbor's wife.
I'm curious. I was really interesting that you talked about people kind of pushing back against even making the film because of the military issue. That's very familiar. But then after the film was made, how was it received? How did people see that? Because just from my own perspective, the fact that it's so much about personal stories, and you get so involved with the people and so committed to those people, all those other issues seem to just kind of drift away in the course of it. Is that how it was received, or did you still get a lot of kind of pushback about that?
Well, I think with the help of the 1993 Senate committee hearings on gays in the military, that was a pretty explosive event for media, for America. it was crazy because it was the first time the story of gay and lesbian people were on national TV in a big major way. Not just one movie of the week, not just maybe a supporting character in some sitcom, but in the news constantly for months. It was broadcast live. I mean, it's like the what other hearings we've heard recently. You know, what's that? Kavanaugh hearings. I mean, it was just broadcast live, and the nation was riveted. So I think the nation, and which includes the LGBT community, was riveted with this footage on TV where senators were talking about, well, we can't have gays in the military because they're going to pork every other soldier in the showers, you know. They were actually saying things. They didn't say pork, but they're actually saying things like that. I was like, I was just like, and we were in the middle of production. Not in the middle, but just the beginning of production. We had just been in production a month, I think. Yeah, mid-January, when, what's his name? Bill Clinton announced this "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" thing. It was like exploded in national news. I mean, Alan Berube was so busy giving interviews. It was crazy because he's the only one that knew about the history. I think because of that national attention, and of course I have to mention that having these gay soldiers, you see, they weren't the only panel in these Senate hearings. There were other panels of gay soldiers. Speaking up on national TV, having the whole nation hear their stories, really influenced, I think, the way people thought of this issue. It didn't help politically as much, but I think with the gay community, they saw, yeah, these are people. These are people being really discriminated against and oppressed and through the system that's so totally unfair. So I think by the time the film came out, the people who were giving us pushback were ready to see that what we were trying to do was not talk about the rights to go to third world countries and kill babies, but really about equality in America. And that's the story that came out. And so it was pretty fully embraced. To answer your question, the reaction was we didn't get any more pushback. I mean, just won all sorts of awards from both gay and non-gay events.
And we have time for like one last question over here. Yeah, fourth row from the back.
Hi, thank you again for the film and the screening. I was curious if there was anything that you had to leave on the cutting room floor that you wish you could have worked in and just like there wasn't a place for it, anything like that.
Yeah, there were a few interviews. If you get the DVD, and there are a few more copies left on Amazon, there are some outtakes of interviews. We interviewed a woman named Edna Rossdow, and I think she was a clinical psychiatrist, like psychologist, or in that department. And the interview just didn't work within the film. We luckily had Nicola, I can't his name. It starts with a G. He's the doctor that's, Herbert Greenspan, that we had in the film, and he worked well with editing. And sometimes with the film, and it's not like the person didn't do what we needed the person to do. It's just that in the cutting, things just get taken out. So I regret that we didn't have her in it because she was a wonderful interview. She was a much older woman, in one of the same age bracket as Herbert Greenspan was. So there was Bert Garrett's, another veteran that had just great stories and great pictures, but it just didn't work out. So there were a few interviews that just didn't work out that it just didn't work out. So I kind of regret that, but that's what happens in the editing room.
Were your subjects kind of scattered out, West Coast? Where were they
Yeah,
living?
we went traveling. It was a lot of fun, actually. Yeah,
I bet.
yeah, it was. Actually, this was the third. Well, the first. No, we had to go everywhere to find them, but they were mostly in California. But we had to go to the West Coast. Clark was in Mobile, Alabama. That's where I got introduced to Waffle House.
Oh,
Yeah,
amazing.
remember Waffle House? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you've
You all know Waffle House? Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Oh, what's that seafood place? That chain. Yeah, Long John Silver. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's my memories of Mobile, Alabama.
It's a very informed audience tonight. You've amassed an incredible body of work, an archive of your own through film, and it now, where does it reside now? If I could.
Well, not the reason I'm here tonight, but it all started actually a long time ago when I first met May, and she was an intern at Outfest, right? At a conference here at UCLA about archival preservation for film. And I don't know why I was on the panel, but I was. And I spoke about how one of my first student films was eaten by termites because I thought termites wouldn't eat film. Well, they don't eat film, they eat cardboard, apparently, and my elements were in cardboard boxes. And I guess that story resonated to UCLA. And what year? And then finally, it was time to take care of stuff. And luckily, I'm not sure how it happened, but Todd Weiner, head of the preservations here, said, what about having your collection at UCLA Film and TV Archives vaults to make sure your termites don't attack them again? So I forget, what year was that? Many years ago. 12 years ago? Yeah. Anyway, so he came over to my house and packed all my stuff away, and now they're safe in Santa Clarita in the new facilities. And the first film that was restored was Forbidden City, USA. We did that in 2015. And then this last year we did, we finished Coming Under Fire, and we just about one step away from finishing Sewing Woman.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but everything's safe. And the videos are safe. Stuff that I don't really want to see again are safe.
Well, I'm heartened to hear that, and I think we are all wealthier for that. So thank you so much for your contributions
you.
and for this wonderful film tonight.